I don't remember much about the ambulance ride, just flashes, the ceiling lights passing overhead, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the searing pain in my gut that made it hard to breathe. My appendix had ruptured. All I could think through the haze was, call Melissa. She's my emergency contact. My wife. My partner of 7 years. I imagined her rushing to the hospital, panicked, worried, holding my hand. That thought kept me anchored through the pain. I didn't know then how wrong I was. When we got to the ER, I was barely conscious. I heard the nurse say they'd called my emergency contact. I blinked at her, struggling to stay present. She looked confused, then deeply uncomfortable. She put the phone on speaker, and I heard my brother's voice, Chase. He was laughing. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Why would Chase answer Melissa's phone? The nurse calmly explained who she was, and that I was in critical condition. I expected silence, maybe urgency, but Chase just chuckled and said, she's kind of busy right now. Then I heard her, Melissa, laughing in the background. My heart sank. The nurse, clearly unsettled, stayed professional, and asked again if Melissa could come to the phone. And then I heard it. Melissa's voice, light and breathless, saying, her hands and mouth are full. I didn't understand at first. The pain was blinding, but the meaning landed like a punch to the chest. My wife and my brother were together. Not just together, in bed. While I was being rushed into emergency surgery, fighting to stay conscious, she was with him, laughing. The nurse ended the call. I could feel her eyes on me, but I couldn't meet them. I wasn't just in physical agony anymore. My chest felt like it had caved in. That one sentence shattered everything. 7 years. 7 years of anniversaries, vacations, lazy Sundays, quiet coffee mornings, ripped apart in under a minute. Lying there, I couldn't speak. I couldn't even cry. I just kept replaying her voice in my head, that laugh, the smug intimacy of it. I wasn't even worth a moment of panic. Not a shred of concern. I could have died right there, and the woman I thought loved me was too busy with my younger brother to care. The surgeon came in and said we needed to operate immediately. I signed the forms with shaking hands. As they wheeled me into the OR, I closed my eyes and tried to pretend none of it was real. But I knew the pain in my gut wasn't the worst part. That would come later. When I woke up after surgery, groggy and disoriented, the harsh lights above me felt like a second sun, and my mouth was dry as sandpaper. My body was heavy, weighed down by tubes, gauze, and a dull ache pulsing through my abdomen where the ruptured appendix had been. I blinked slowly, my mind still catching up, and turned my head, half expecting Melissa sitting beside me, holding my hand like she always promised she would if anything ever happened. But it wasn't her. It was my dad. He sat stiffly in the chair beside the hospital bed, arms crossed over his chest, his jaw tight. Ronald Walker wasn't a man known for softness. He built houses with his hands, raised me with calloused palms and hard-earned wisdom. But right now, even through the stoicism, I could see something breaking behind his eyes. Concern, disappointment, anger, all twisted into a silence that filled the room like smoke. He stood when he saw me stir. You're awake, he said, his voice gruff but steady. You made it. I nodded, swallowing with difficulty. Yeah, I rasped, then paused, letting the silence linger just long enough to ask the question without asking it. He knew. She's not here, he said flatly. I called her 3 times. No answer. He shifted his weight like the words tasted sour. Chase picked up. Said she was in the shower. I turned my face away, feeling the sting of betrayal all over again. I didn't want to cry. Not in front of my dad. Not now, but something inside me cracked wide open. I heard them. I whispered. Before surgery. The nurse called her, and Chase answered her phone. I heard her laugh. Said she was busy. My voice trembled on that last word. Not from pain, but from a memory that refused to leave me. My dad didn't speak for a long time. He just stood there, staring past me at the hospital wall like he could burn a hole in it. Then he finally spoke, and his voice was ice. You sure? He asked, not because he doubted me, but because he needed to believe it wasn't true. I nodded once. That was enough. His face changed. Whatever softness was there vanished, replaced with something sharper, older, a kind of controlled rage only a man like him could hold on to without letting it consume him. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. We're going to do this the right way, he said. No yelling, no scenes, no playing dumb. You rest. I'll take care of everything else. When you're strong enough, we'll handle it together. That moment between us wasn't dramatic, not theatrical. It was quiet, grim, and final. There was no going back. Something had broken, and he knew it as clearly as I did. We were 2 men cut from the same stone, betrayed by people we trusted, and ready to see the truth for what it was, no matter how much it hurt. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't do much except stare at the ceiling, listening to the constant hum of machines and the quiet beeps that marked the rhythm of my own body trying to recover. Every breath was a dull ache, but it was nothing compared to the gnawing inside my chest. Betrayal doesn't stab you, it festers. It burns slowly, eating away at your dignity, your sense of reality. And while I lay there, motionless, trying to process the fact that my wife and my brother were doing God knows what while I was being cut open, my father was already moving. He stood just outside the door, speaking in his low, commanding voice, making calls like he was preparing for war. I heard the names, even through the morphine haze. First was Patricia Grant. I hadn't thought about her in years, but I knew exactly who she was. The kind of woman who could strip a man bare in court and make him apologize for wasting her time. She had a reputation across Texas, a shark in heels who didn't just win, she humiliated. My dad gave her the basics, laying it all out in a calm, calculated tone. Emergency surgery, wife unreachable, brother answering her phone, explicit innuendo, and hours of silence that followed. She didn't hesitate. She'd take the case. The second call was to Martin Diaz, our family's accountant. He'd been with us since I was in high school, the kind of guy who remembered every decimal and could smell financial fuckery from a mile away. Dad asked him to pull every account Melissa and I shared. Joint checking, credit cards, investments, anything she had access to. He wanted it cataloged. Not just balances, but spending, travel, purchases, transfers. The whole picture. Then came a third call. That one hurt the most. Eric Barnes, my best friend since we were 8 years old. We built tree forts together, got our first beers from the same gas station clerk, covered for each other through every teenage disaster. Eric had served in the Army, then came back and became a licensed PI. We hadn't talked much recently. Life gets in the way, but I knew he'd be there when I needed him. My dad explained everything, gave him my hospital room number, and said we need surveillance. Discreet, fast, and ruthless. By the time Melissa finally walked into the room, 5 hours had passed. 5 hours of her not picking up. 5 hours after my father had tried again and again to reach her. She breezed in like it was a normal Tuesday, her hair damp and twisted up, skin flushed like she'd come straight from steam room. Her smile was wide, practiced, casual. "Oh my God, baby, are you okay?" she asked, crossing the room with exaggerated urgency. She leaned over to kiss me, and I turned my face slightly. I couldn't even look at her. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice hoarse but steady. She blinked, then did that little nervous laugh she used when she was lying. "At the gym. My phone was in the locker. I came as soon as I saw the missed calls." That was the moment I knew. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Too easy, too smooth. And I already knew what she told the nurse. I already knew who answered. I already knew she hadn't been anywhere near a gym. But I let her talk. I let her stand there, next to my bed, fake concern on her face, and lie to me like I hadn't heard it all. Because the truth was, I didn't need to catch her in a lie. She already had. Now I just needed to make sure I had everything else. And thanks to my dad, that process had already begun. She stood at the foot of my hospital bed, arms crossed now, not even pretending to cry anymore. The fake softness from earlier had disappeared, and her face had tightened into something defensive, calculating. My father stood behind me, arms folded, eyes fixed on her like stone. He hadn't said a word since she walked in, but his presence was thunder in the silence. I took a breath, each word scraping against the exhaustion that still clung to my ribs. "So, Melissa," I said quietly, "why don't you tell me again where you were when the nurse called?" She blinked, shifted her weight. "I told you I was at the gym. My phone was in my locker. I came as soon as I saw the mist." "That's funny," I interrupted, keeping my voice even. "Because the nurse put you on speaker. And it wasn't you who answered. It was Chase." Her eyes flickered. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. He laughed. "You laughed. You joked that your hands and mouth were full." Her lips parted slightly. A tiny shake of the head. "That's not what you heard. You were on meds. You were in pain. You're confused." "Melissa," my father's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Where is Chase?" That was when it happened. That split second. The moment her poker face cracked. She flinched. Just slightly, but it was enough. A stutter in her breath. A flicker of guilt she didn't have time to mask. "You were never at the gym," I said. "You weren't working out. You were with him. And you didn't even care that I was in surgery. You ignored the calls. You let him answer your phone." Her chin trembled. Then she hardened again, arms tight against her chest. "You don't know what you're talking about." But she was unraveling. She was sweating. Her voice lost its edge. That's when Dad stepped forward and pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. He held it out toward her, didn't say anything. She didn't move to take it, just stared at it like it might burn her hands. "That's from Martin," I said. "Our accountant. It's the joint savings account, my business account. You transferred money. Small amounts at first. Spread out over months. $47,000 in total. She looked away. It went into your personal checking. Then Chase's. Still silence. My chest tightened, but I wasn't done. Eric followed the trail. You used it for hotel stays, restaurant bills, weekend getaways. You even booked a couple's massage at Lakeway Spa under his name. Her face went pale. You stole from my company. Lied to my face. Spent money we earned together to cheat on me with my brother. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then finally, she broke. Yes, she snapped. Yes, Chase and I are together. You think I'd stay with someone like you forever? He's better than you, in every way. He actually sees me. He listens. You were always obsessed with your business, your numbers, your stupid warehouse. My dad didn't raise his voice. He didn't move fast. He just took one slow step forward. Eyes like ice. Get out, he said. Melissa froze. You heard me, he growled. This isn't your house anymore. This isn't your life. You forfeited that the second you betrayed my son. She looked between us, maybe expecting one of us to crumble. But I didn't. Neither did he. She turned without another word and walked out, her footsteps sharp against the sterile tile. And just like that, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with became a stranger I couldn't wait to forget. The days after that confrontation blurred together, but not because things slowed down. They sped up in a way that felt unreal, like once the first light cracked, everything underneath came apart at once. I was still recovering in the hospital when Eric started sending updates, each one worse than the last. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't have to. The facts were enough. The emails went back 18 months. Not weeks. Not a moment of weakness. A year and a half of messages that started innocently enough, at least on the surface. Complaints about me working late. Jokes about how I was predictable. Long threads about how lonely she felt while I was playing businessman. Emotional betrayal came long before anything physical, and seeing it laid out in black and white hurt in a way I didn't know was possible. She hadn't just cheated on me. She'd rewritten our marriage while I was still living in it. Then came the money trail. Martin confirmed what we suspected. The transfers weren't random. They were planned. Small enough to avoid alerts, frequent enough to add up fast. She and Chase discussed it openly in messages, calling it our safety net and our exit fund. They talked about draining me slowly, about how I'd be too busy to notice, about how my trust made it easy. That part stung almost as much as the affair. I wasn't just a husband to her. I was a resource. But the worst part came last. Eric warned me before showing it to me. He said he almost didn't want to send it at all. It was a message thread between Melissa and Chase dated months before my appendix rupture. At first glance, it looked like dark humor, the kind of reckless talk people convince themselves doesn't mean anything. Melissa joked about how exhausting my schedule was, and how sometimes she imagined life would be easier if I just wasn't around anymore. I remember staring at that line, my hands shaking, trying to tell myself it was just a metaphor. Then I read Chase's reply. Maybe we held something happen. It was followed by a laughing emoji. Then a comment about how accidents happen all the time. No plan. No steps. No action ever taken. But it existed. Written. Sent. Saved. Two people I trusted talking casually about a world where I didn't exist. I felt sick. When my dad read it, he didn't say anything at first. He just closed his eyes and took a slow breath like he was steadying himself against something heavy. Chase was his son too. And in that moment, I saw what it cost him to accept what was in front of him. The shame was written all over his face. Not just as a father, but as a man who believed he raised his children right. Patricia reviewed everything. The emails, the transfers, the receipts, the messages. She didn't soften it. She didn't exaggerate either. She told me plainly that we were looking at embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. She said the messages about my death crossed a line into territory no one should ignore, even if nothing ever came of it. Intent mattered, documentation mattered. She asked me what I wanted to do. For the first time since waking up from surgery, the answer was easy. File the charges, I said. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but because what they did wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was calculated. It was hidden, and it could have cost me everything. The moment the charges were filed, everything moved like a machine designed to dismantle the life they had built on lies. Patricia made sure the divorce petition was submitted with urgency, and the judge approved the request to freeze all joint assets. Melissa was served at her mother's house, in full view of the neighbors. According to the process server, she didn't say a word when she read the papers. Just stared, lips pressed tight, trying to keep her composure while the foundation of her false little empire collapsed in her hands. Chase wasn't so lucky. He tried to run. Eric found him first. He'd been keeping tabs and knew Chase was holed up at a friend's apartment just outside Round Rock. The process server followed Eric's lead and waited until Chase stepped out for a smoke. When he saw the paperwork, he bolted. The guy barely made it 3 steps before being taken down in the front yard. He yelled, struggled, but it was over fast. The embarrassment was just beginning. The district attorney didn't hesitate. With Patricia's documentation and Eric's collected evidence, emails, account records, messages suggesting harm, the DA moved with a speed I didn't think was possible in the legal system. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. The suggestion of intent to cause harm made them consider the possibility of attempted murder, even if it would be hard to prove in court. But it didn't need to go that far. What they had was already enough. Bail was set at $50,000 each. With the accounts frozen, neither of them could pay it. From jail, Chase had the nerve to call my father. He asked for help, pleaded. He said it was all a mistake, that he didn't mean it, that he didn't know how things had gone this far. My dad listened quietly, let him finish. Then he gave him the only answer that mattered. You laughed while your brother was dying, he said, then hung up. Melissa's mother came to see me 2 days later. She knocked on my father's door, eyes red, hands shaking, clutching her purse like she expected to be thrown off the porch. She said Melissa was breaking down, that prison would ruin her life, that she needed help, not punishment. I let her speak. I let her beg. Then I asked one question. Did she mention the emails where she fantasized about me dying? Or the message where Chase suggested they help something happen? Her mouth opened, then closed. The color drained from her face. She hadn't known. Or maybe she had, but hearing it from me made it real. I stepped back, held the door. I suggest you leave. She hesitated, searching for something to say, but there was nothing left to defend. No excuse worth speaking. She turned slowly, walked down the porch steps like she was walking through fog. And then I shut the door. Quietly. Completely. Forever. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not just in temperature, but in energy. The air was heavy with tension from the moment the trial began. Every shuffle of paper, every murmur, felt louder than it should. I sat at the front, beside Patricia, flanked by my father and Eric, trying to keep my breathing steady while everything I'd lived through for the past several months was dragged into the light. Melissa and Chase sat across from us, both wearing county-issued clothes, looking small for the first time in their lives. They wouldn't look at me. The nurse was the first to testify. She walked in calmly and recounted the phone call, her voice steady but clipped, like she had memorized every word. She described putting the phone on speaker, hearing Chase's laugh, Melissa's voice in the background, and the phrase that still echoed in my memory. Her hands and mouth are full. There wasn't a sound in the room as she spoke. Even the judge seemed to shift uncomfortably in his seat. Then my father took the stand. He didn't raise his voice, didn't speak with anger, just laid out the timeline. He spoke of calling Melissa, of Chase answering again with a dismissive tone, and how he arrived at the hospital while I was still unconscious, trying to reach someone who clearly didn't care. His voice cracked once when he said, I thought I failed as a father, and then he collected himself like a man swallowing fire. The silence that followed his testimony was deafening. Eric was next. He didn't embellish. He brought the receipts, literally. Hotel bookings, restaurant bills, flight confirmations, photos. Everything had timestamps. Some of them were from nights I remembered being home alone, wondering why Melissa was distant or why she claimed she had work events that ran late. He placed copies of Chase and Melissa's messages into evidence, screenshots, texts, emails. No one spoke as he explained how long the affair had been going on and how it had crossed from betrayal into criminal conspiracy. But the most brutal moment came when the prosecutor read the email aloud, the one where Melissa had written about how life would be easier if I died, and Chase had replied, maybe we help something happen. The words hung in the courtroom like smoke. Jurors flinched. One woman put her hand to her mouth. I didn't move. I couldn't. I stared straight ahead, because if I let myself look at them, I didn't trust what I'd do. Melissa's defense tried to spin it as fantasy. Just words. Nothing ever acted upon. Patricia stood up so calmly, so coldly, and dismantled it with a precision I didn't know was possible. When you combine words with motive, access, stolen funds, and lies during a medical emergency, she said, you don't get fantasy. You get premeditation. The jury didn't take long. They came back guilty. Chase was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Melissa got 2 years plus 5 years of probation. The judge added $50,000 in restitution to be paid directly to me, and another $150,000 in punitive damages. They had no assets left. Everything they had touched had been drained, mismanaged, or frozen. But the debt doesn't go away. It follows them. It sits on their credit reports, their tax filings, every job application, every mortgage attempt, every moment of their future. And now I own that future, not to ruin it, but to remind them they never really got away with anything. 6 months after the trial, I barely recognized my life. And for once, that wasn't a bad thing. I sold the old house, the one Melissa and I had shared. Every room tainted by memories that no longer belonged to me. I didn't take anything from it except my name. Letting go of the physical space felt like dropping a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. I bought a smaller place, quieter, cleaner. It didn't have the big kitchen she insisted on, or the sprawling backyard I never had time to enjoy, but it felt like mine in a way that nothing had in years. My business not only recovered, it thrived. I poured myself into it, not to escape, but to build something that could no longer be touched by lies. The clients kept coming, referrals doubled, and I started seeing the kind of growth I'd only dreamed about before. For the first time, success didn't feel hollow. It felt earned. I saw my dad more often too. Twice a week, like clockwork, we had dinner. Sometimes we didn't talk about anything important, just sat with a couple of beers, watching a game, eating barbecue. Other times, we talked about everything. What it meant to lose people you thought you knew. What it meant to stand up when you had every reason to fall apart. There were things we didn't say out loud. Pain we both carried in different shapes. But there was peace in the silence between us. He had been the one to believe me. When it mattered, I wouldn't forget that. Dating was complicated. I didn't throw myself into it. I wasn't looking to fill a space. I went slow. Coffee instead of dinner. Long conversations before meeting in person. I didn't trust easily anymore, and I didn't pretend otherwise. But I was open, cautiously, deliberately, and that was enough for now. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway. Brandon? It's Emily. Emily Carter. The name hit me like a gust of wind. Chase's college ex. They dated off and on during school, and I remembered her being kind, quiet, maybe a little too trusting. I hadn't heard from her in years. She got straight to it. I've been following the trial. I saw the articles. I needed to tell you something. She told me Chase had done something similar to her family years ago. Not with emails or elaborate scams, but with money. Promises of investment. Quiet manipulation. She said he borrowed thousands from her father under the guise of starting a business, then disappeared when the money ran out. She said she saw the same patterns in your story, and it brought everything back. It wasn't just Melissa. That was the truth I hadn't even realized I needed. She was a liar, a thief, a traitor, but Chase had been the infection. The rot. He had done this before. Probably would have done it again. He wasn't a victim of circumstance. He was a parasite from the start. And somehow, knowing that gave me peace. It confirmed what I already knew deep down, that none of this had ever been about something I lacked. It wasn't about not being enough. It was about two people who never knew how to build, only take. Justice had been served. The scars were still there, some of them deep, some invisible to everyone but me. But I'd stopped hiding them. I wore them like armor now. I had survived betrayal, humiliation, loss. I had faced people who wanted me erased, broken, forgotten. And I was still here. Not bitter, not angry. Clear. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough.